Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. Here's what we are talking about. Day one of the impeachment trial is in the books as the Senate votes to proceed with Trump's case after a debate about the constitutionality of going after a president that is currently not in office. Also, meanwhile, what Trump's up to. He's in his self-imposed exile, and he's watching with a little bit of unhappiness as the second impeachment trial unfolds, as Ashley Parker and Josh Dawsey report that in the Washington Post. And yeah, we're going to kind of break that down and get into it. Like the impact of the impeachment, what really will come from this in terms of long-lasting and kind of how do we go about kind of putting down the violence and taking down the temperature, and how do we go about reaching these Republicans who have been so far alienated. We will discuss also the Beltway media is manufacturing consent about these $2,000 survival checks and how all of a sudden maybe you don't really need them as much as you think you may need them. Maybe that was all a delusion. And also we're going to take a look at some of the income requirements being shifted around, and of course really why they're happening, and give us some credit to some people who have also been a little bit of a kind of targets of some ire, at least on my show, which are some of the kind of progressive leaders in Congress. They've actually gotten a little bit of a win here, it looks like, early on in this Biden administration. The key stimulus fight, welcome, is 480. Newsflash here, and we're pleased to have back with us one of our regular guests, James Stanley. James, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so we're going to be talking about first here with this impeachment. And yeah, so pretty much the big news of today is the Senate has decided to proceed with the trial, but Trump does have enough votes here for acquittal. The Senate voted on Tuesday to proceed with the impeachment trial of former President Trump, rejecting his defense team's claim that it would be unconstitutional to prosecute a president after leaving office. But the final tally signaled that his Republican allies could muster enough support to potentially block the two-thirds necessary for conviction here. So let's kind of get into it. We'll start kind of from the ground floor here and build our way up to the broader conversation. So, James, what was your reaction to the case made today about constitutionality? It really looked like, from what I could tell, the House manager's case really blew the Trump lawyer's case out of the water. But, yeah, like, what was your take on today's events?
Well, I thought that it was very well prepared, very well drafted, and I thought that it was articulately given out to the members of the Senate. I think one of the impeachment managers, David Cicilline, who's a Democrat from Rhode Island's, I believe, 1st congressional district, might be 2nd. There's only 2. I thought his points were very good. He was the one who was making the point that he was actually, quite frankly, debunking the entire claim that the Republicans continuously say, which is that you can't impeach Trump because he's a private citizen now. And he had, like, on a slideshow there that explicitly states in the Constitution, it doesn't say president, it says person or body. And he made a very good point that Trump technically fits both of those definitions, because there's nowhere in there that it says you have to be a sitting president to get impeached. You can be convicted of crimes. I mean, basically, he also made a good point that it's basically like saying that because the bank robber lives in Canada now, you can't charge him for robbing a couple banks in the U.S. before he went across the border. Because, as we all know, the U.S. is very, very strongly, since the Trump era, was very, very adamant about getting criminals back over from other countries, and really, I mean, using pretty forceful laws against them, immigrants, and even people who committed crimes that went over to other countries. But I think the points that were made today were pretty clear that impeachment is constitutional right now. My only hesitance with continuing down this path is a further delay of other proposals. Now, I know Chuck Schumer has mentioned that they're going to somehow collaterally do both. Now, from my understanding, I presume they're going to be doing this during the time when one of the lawyers has requested there not be an impeachment because of Shabbat on Friday and Saturday. I presume that's when the Senate will get into normal business. But besides that, overall, today was a relatively good day. I think that the Democrats, the impeachment managers, that is, were overly prepared for rather ignorant individuals, to say the least. But at the same time, I was very pleased in what I heard.
Yeah, it definitely did not look like. I mean, I personally thought that the presentation by the, especially like people like Jamie Raskin and uh, David Cicilline they were very good presentations. They're definitely like very true, and like there's nothing wrong with them. But I'm kind of someone who is really not very much motivated by this whole idea in the first place. I may have some sort of misunderstanding with this here, but is it true that you could just pass through a simple majority vote, barring Trump to ever run again?
Yeah, you could. The thing is, when he's convicted. I believe that there's actually a thing that has something to do uh, with being able to vote again. Now, I know for a fact, because that's all what I think, but I know for a fact this portion is I know you can pass a censure agreement, which is actually what we were just talking about before the show came on. Susan Collins and Tim Kaine, both of the senators, have cooperatively brought that to the table instead of impeachment. But to answer your question, when a president gets impeached, if they're convicted of the crime, I believe they are barred from office in the future. But given
They
the
are,
fact
but
that
like for this censure proposal from Kaine and Collins, doesn't that effectively just serve the purpose of barring him from going again in 2020?
Yeah, I think that's actually, I believe, if I'm correct, I think that's all they're trying to, like, it's going to be like basically a slap on the wrist on top of it. But I think the main part of the censure is to try to make sure, he can't run again.
Yeah, but then
I believe
that's all
main.
you can really do with impeachment, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's part of it. I mean, technically, he could be convicted in the court of law now because he is out of the office. This is actually
Yeah,
like
but
an interesting question.
that's not something the Senate has any control over, though. Like if
No,
you're talking about politically, and
yeah,
especially with the important things you got to do, if you're the Senate in terms of getting relief out there, and that should be definitely a bigger priority for Democrats if they want to keep the Senate and maybe like win in this like place like Pennsylvania, which I definitely think they could. Why not just pass this thing that really is the best you can do anyway, even if you do convict him, which you won't, like that says that Trump can't run from office again, and just be done with it and hope that he does get picked up in a court of law, which again, it doesn't seem like something the Senate has any control over what happens there.
I mean, I honestly think the only thing that they could really do at this point is just get rid of this whole entire impeachment thing. But going back to what the powers, like what they can do, I honestly think, yeah, I think, well, I know for a fact, that they can bar him from office. And this is the second part I'm just trying to remember. They can bar, and well, obviously they can remove him, but since he's already out of office, they can't do that. But besides that, I believe that's honestly it. See, I also know for a fact that impeachment does hypothetically would go onto, I believe, would go onto his record if they're going to actually charge him with I believe they're doing the insurrection, correct? But I forgot that the article exactly.
Yeah, the article was about the insurrection. Yeah.
Yeah, so technically that would actually go like it's similar to actually like a criminal. Basically, it would be on his file.
Yeah, but
now,
like what? So then that would be the mechanism that prevents him from running again. But like even still, it's the same outcome. So what is the point if you can just get what you want to do in the end? Like, is the point just some big show? Like that seems to be all it is.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is going to be a big show. I think the one thing that they're trying to see here is I think they want to have an aspect of traditionalism. I mean, I'm trying to like back up from the situation, get like a non-biased point of view. I think they're trying to get like a traditional system in place here, and I think that for some reason, I almost feel as if they think that they can try to get the extra. I think it's 11 Republican senators they need to get to the 16.
I mean,
do I think they're going to do
but
it? No.
nobody thinks that. There's no one even in the media, no one who's observing this any kind of rational way. Like, what would make the senators think that? I just don't think there's any kind of political point to this. other than like a big show, which I don't even think that's going to really resonate with a lot of people, especially Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't necessarily know why exactly they're going to be going through it if they don't really think that they're going to be able to get more Republicans over. The only thing that I can really think of here is that they want to have a fair trial. They want to bring witnesses in, and maybe by doing that, they can interrogate Republicans to vote with them. At the same time, the problem with the censure is that there's no type of fair trial. And then we have an argument that's going to be brought up by the QAnon party with the Republicans at this point. That's what I call them, which is that, there's no fair trial. There's no this, there's no that. They're going to be, basically harassing everything. And they're obviously not going to vote for either way if they did the censure after the impeachment. But I think the whole thing they wanted to do is they didn't want to make it look unfair because, look, you have to admit, 2022 is not going to be a positive year for the Democrats unless Biden actually gets a lot of things done, like what Bush did, for example, in 2002 after 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
So far, I am optimistic about Biden delivering. I mean, just given what I've seen so far, it's not horrible. It's not as good as, it's not as bad as I thought it would be, actually, to be honest. But at the same time, it's not like the best. So I can't even say if they're going to be able to win more seats in House, because I don't think that's going to happen just because of gerrymandering. But overall, I think like the one thing that I think they really want to do here is they don't want to make it like a campaign push. Like, yeah, you can maybe attack Democrats for doing impeachment, but what you can't attack them for is not having a fair trial. And well, I think most Americans actually believe in the impeachment as well. I think that's actually part
and
of
I think
it.
also there's a large portion of Americans who believe in just removing Trump from office. So like, where's the you just pass like before like day one, you get in there and you say, okay, Trump's no longer going to be allowed to run for office again, and then you're like, okay, we have to now pass very ambitious kind of COVID relief, raise the minimum wage, all that kind of stuff. Like do this kind of big action that get this money out there, which. Even then, as we will get into, they are seeming to have a little bit of trouble with that. But it is very, very interesting. I do kind of want to shift gears a little bit to talk about like the Republican Party here. And because, of course, as we discussed, at this point, it's pretty much completely unlikely that we will see 17 Republicans necessary to flip. But the thing is, what did it didn't really always seem that it had to be this way, because there was times where we heard rumblings about Mitch McConnell possibly saying that he would vote to convict Trump, and I see like possibly that would free up a sizable margin of people who were really just pissed off with Trump and just wanted to take him out of the Republican Party. He was no longer worth the trouble. Like if they could just really do that push to remove him, they seemed like they were preparing to do that. But then it kind of faded away. Did you get that sense here? Like, can you take us a little bit more through those moments that kind of where the support for impeachment in the Republican Party seemed to ebb, and then it kind of it began to grow, and then it kind of ebbed out to where it is now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think overall, I think a lot of the Republicans who wanted him to be impeached were definitely not the Trump-style Republicans. Do I think the Republican Party is the party of Trump? I think has many aspects of Trumpism that is still going to resonate in that party for years. I think the people who are like the Susan Collins of the party, the moderates, the Rockefeller type Republicans are probably the ones who are mostly making up the support for the impeachment. I also think partly some of the people who are more of the traditional Republicans, which I know may be a little shocking because traditional Republicans are pretty much on par with Trump's policies. They just don't have his rhetoric along for the ride. I mean, people like Jeb Bush, I don't know if he's necessarily supports, but one thing I will say about Jeb Bush,
people like Liz Cheney and all those. The Liz Cheney ideological group. But there was also kind of a substantial amount of people who are kind of more in line with the Mitch McConnell kind of framework. Like, I wouldn't necessarily say like Rockefeller Republican, just kind of more like pro-corporate over anything kind of Trump. They're not as tied to the base. They're maybe from kind of a like slightly purplish state, like Pat Toomey or something like that. And just who are probably more tied to McConnell in the Senate than Donald Trump. So there is like the kind of thinking was there. I don't know exactly who these names would be, but they free up some people. If McConnell goes one way, then that could probably swing maybe like a quarter to